What's up, friends? So this week we're doing something a little different. Um, I'm going to do like a question and answer. I recorded a couple of videos during the week and answered some questions that I got. And so I'm kind of putting them together as a episode of me answering questions that you guys send me. So kind of testing this out. I want to see how it works. If you guys like this format, then we might maybe do 2 episodes a week and add this as kind of a second thing. So yeah, just testing it out. So enjoy. And feel free to send me questions, boss at yesquityourdayjob.com. Again, this is 7 Dunbar. Yeah, enjoy. There we go. I'm in frame. I'm here. We're all good. Awesome. So I got a question today. The question is, looking back now, what was your I made it moment? So yeah, questions looking back now, what was your I made it moment? Like the moment where I sat back and really thought, okay, I've made it in the music industry, I'm assuming is what they mean. And man, if I'm being honest, like, I don't think I have one. I don't think I've made it. I think at every stage of my career. So like, man, thinking back, like I started making music, like trying to start a band with my friends, and like my first instrument was bass. I was probably like 12 years old. 12, yeah, and like around 14, got like my first real band together, and we were like a little garage band, and Korn had just come out, and we wanted to be Korn so bad, I think I don't think we would have admitted it at the time, but that was definitely the vibe, There's pictures of me when I'm like 16 wearing Adidas shirts, I'm sure. But, at that point it was like, okay, if we can just do a show, like, and people like buy our cassette tapes, like we've made it. And people did. And then we won the Battle of the Bands, and we were in the local newspaper, the Boca News in Boca Raton, Florida. And it was like, oh my God, we're in the newspaper. We made it, Well, I was like, well, now as I went on with my musical endeavors, it was like, okay, well, now I'm playing bass essentially in bands, and I was like, wow, what if I had my own band and I was the singer and I was the front man for it? Like maybe then I'd really make it, And so I did that, and I wrote a whole album and formed my own band and got people to play with me in the band, and started doing local shows and really fun, successful shows at like Culture Room in Fort Lauderdale and stuff. And the owner there, this guy Greg, was really supportive of us and really supportive of the local scene, and would put us on as the local band for like big tours coming through and stuff. And then he would put together these huge local shows of us. And there was like some of the other bands that were around doing stuff then. It was like Dead Star Assembly and In Code and Morrison Poe. And man, there were so many good bands that were just local bands that we were just kind of doing stuff, all at the same time, trying to have fun and do shows. And so we started doing that, and it was like, wow, if we could just get out of South Florida, then we've made it. Now we're not just a local band anymore. So we started traveling to Tampa, and we'd go to Orlando, and we'd go to Jacksonville, and it's like, Ocala. We used to play at the skate park in Ocala, where we were literally on top of a like a skateboard ramp, and there was like 500 kids there, and we're in Ocala's horse country. It's middle of nowhere, but like, oh my God, like people here coming out to our shows, they're appreciating what we're doing. Like we've made it. And then it was like, well, we're still a Florida band though. We have to get out and tour nationally. So my friends and, my friend James and my friends in Crossbreed had introduced me to the guys from Mushroomhead and put in a really good recommendation. It's like, man, this band Human Factors Lab, you got to take them out on tour with you. And luckily for me, they did. And so we had an opportunity, and now we're a support band on a national tour for the first time ever. And our name is on flyers, and our name is on the radio, and it's in magazines, and wherever else, this tour was being promoted, we were included in all that ad map. And we're playing to like 500 people a night. We're getting paid for it. We're making money from the shows. We're getting paid from the merchandise. People are liking what we're doing. We're signing autographs. We're taking photos. And I was like, oh my God, we're on this national tour. We've made it. And then that tour led to other tours. We did some great stuff with Mushroomhead more. And we went out with KMFDM, who I grew up listening to and was, one of my favorite bands. And now we're on tour with them and we're opening. And it was this kind of thing where it's like, okay, we've toured a lot now and but we're just the support band. It's not our tour. We're opening up for a bigger band. Maybe if we get and we do our own tour, then we've made it, right? And I think you see the pattern that's happening here. And so this went on. And then my career as an engineer, not just as an artist and a musician, but I started working in studios when I was 15. And I went to school for audio engineering. I went to Full Sail in Orlando. I was working in studios before I went to college in Fort Lauderdale and in Miami and Orlando eventually. And I was young, and as a kid, basically walking down the halls of these studios, and it's filled with just the platinum records of bands that you recognize, and as going into college and going to school for audio engineering, and I remember day one walking in those halls, and they're just lined with platinum albums, and me going, man, if I work really hard here and I really dedicate everything to this and make this my life and be the best that I can and really try to be the best at this, one day I'll get my own platinum album. There's some project I'll work on and I'll record and I'll have a platinum album. And as you notice behind me, I have a couple. I have a lot. And that's great. And I'm excited for it. But sure enough, I sit there and I go, man, I got like 60 of these things. I've worked with some great artists and I've had the privilege to be involved in really great albums with great artists and great engineers and producers, and just the experiences have been amazing in that regard. But maybe if I get a platinum album with my own band, I'll have made it, right? That's when I'll make it. And so I think the theme, I think what it is I don't think I've made it. And the reason I say that is because there is this blessing and a curse that anytime I achieve a goal that I've really wanted and worked for, and I thought that that's what I'm supposed to be doing, I get there and it's not always that fulfilling. It's not, it's like the curse of getting what you want, I think. So it's, I get there and I'm like, man, I achieved this thing, but now I want the next thing. And it's not out of greed. It's just ambition, maybe, for wanting to achieve more and do the most I can and be the best I can and have the most impact on the world and impact people's lives in a positive way. So, there's that thing where like, it's a curse because am I ever going to be happy? Am I happy now? Will I ever be? Maybe. Or am I always going to be struggling to reach something that's always just out of reach? Because once I do get there, then I want the next best thing. I think it's a blessing, though, in the sense that that's kept me going. That is a drive that I don't settle, and things can't be good enough. They have to be at my standard, which is pretty high for pretty much everything in my life. I keep things at a very high standard. And so it's, I think it's good because I will always try to do the best. And it's taken me places because there's a lot of places where people would be content and they would go, okay, I did what I wanted and I reached what I wanted. And so they stop working as hard. They stop putting in the effort. They stop reaching for those goals or chasing those dreams. And I don't know, maybe the right answer is somewhere in between. I think a little bit of it is always be looking for more and always be going for better. but also stop and realize where you are and what you've done and how far you've come and what the work you've done means. For me, the only time I perceive myself in a way that I think I've succeeded or had some accomplishment or made it is through other people's comments, where somebody, I get a glimpse of how other people view me, which doesn't always align with the way I view myself. And so somebody will say, oh, wow, I can't even think of an exact example right now, but, well, even this video, somebody left a comment earlier on a TikTok video, and they said, with your podcast, you're interviewing everybody else, but what about your stories? You've worked on so-and-so album. I bet you have some great stories. And I sit back and I think about it. And I go, oh, yeah, I guess I did work on that album. And that album was really successful. And I do have stories from that. So, yeah, hopefully that answered the question. Maybe it didn't. Maybe it opens some more questions. But, yeah, I think what I'm going to start doing is answering more of the questions, because with the Yes, Quit Your Day Job podcast, it's me talking with other people. And the podcast is designed for me to give other people a platform and tell their stories and share their passions, which doesn't leave a lot of room for me to share mine. So, yeah, keep asking questions. You can send emails, boss@yesquityourdayjob.com. Yeah, hit me up. Let me know. Hey, so today's question is actually, what was that? It was, how do you know when a song is actually finished? So the question is, how do you know when a song is actually finished? And I think the short answer is it isn't. Art's never completed; it's only abandoned. But if we dive into that a little bit, so it depends on a lot of things. So, like, let's say, for example, you're doing sync. You're writing songs for film or television, and maybe you get a brief, and it's a sound-alike brief. So what that means is you'll have like music supervisors or people that are responsible for getting songs placed into film and TV shows. They want something that sounds like something that's popular without actually using that song. So, and a brief is just an instruction that's kind of sent out, a request, if you will, that's sent out to different composers and people in the industry to be able to do that job. So let's say you have a sound-alike brief, and it's saying, okay, we want a song that sounds like Billie Eilish, and it has to have a tambourine in it. And, maybe it's that simple. Okay. And so you write a song that sounds like that. Now, when is that finished? Is it finished when it sounds exactly like Billie Eilish or the tambourine is just right? Probably not. In a situation like that, it's finished when you do the job, when the person says, like, okay, that's exactly what we wanted, and I think that I encounter that a lot with my mixing. If I really, really wanted to, I would obsess over mixing a song. I don't know if it would ever be done, because mixing is also an art form. So I would sit there and I would, hold on, my dog's making a weird noise. Tui, what are you doing? Anyways, I'm just going to leave that in. I'm not even going to edit it out. So, okay. So like mixing, for example, yeah, I could obsess over that mix, and I could really want to make it perfect, but it might never be perfect. And so I think, again, that comes down to where I get it to a point where I'm like, okay, this is about as far as I can really take it. I kind of recognize when I'm starting to get just a little obsessive and doing too much. Like you can overshoot, and you can start tweaking, whether it's songwriting or mixing. You start moving things too much, and you're like, okay, it's almost perfect, but if I do just a little bit more, it'll be even more perfect. And then you overshoot it, and now you've ruined it and kind of got to start over. So I've been doing this long enough, I can recognize when I'm at that point, and I will submit it to the client. And 9 times out of 10, the client's like, wow, this is better than I even imagined. So for me, maybe there's that voice in my head that's like, I could have done better. But the reality is I've exceeded the client's expectations. That's when that's finished, When it comes to writing my own songs, I I have hundreds of, I call them sketches. Maybe it's an 8-bar loop. Maybe it's a melody line. Maybe it's like a chorus, like could be something. But the songs aren't doing anybody any good on your hard drive. If you're writing the perfect song, I mean, I'll be honest with you. I have an EP and a full album right now that I've been sitting on for over a year, and it's. I just need to finish it. So maybe I'm being a little hypocritical because I'm doing exactly what I say don't do here, but the songs aren't doing anybody any good on your hard drive. You got to get them to a point, and it comes to a point where it's more important just to get them out into the world than it is to make them the absolutely perfect song. Because as an artist, you're never going to be completely satisfied. It's never going to be finished for you. So get it to a point the way I've started to overcome it, and even with the EP and the album that I'm talking about, I have schedules now of going, okay, I'm going to finish this album, and I'm dedicating this amount of time to sit down and working on the album, and it's going to be done by this date. And when I set myself deadlines and schedules like that I dedicate that time to do that, I get it done. And I've done albums like that in the past. We did with Human Factor, my band now is 7 Factor, but with Human Factors Lab, we did an album called The Suicide Diaries, and we planned every part of that out. We didn't have the songs even written yet, but we had writing sessions. We knew when we were in the studio. I was still writing on the plane from Florida out to Los Angeles. I was in the studio with Verena while he's mixing, and I'm writing, or I'm outside while everybody's doing stuff, and I'm still writing the lyrics. I think a part of that album I freestyled on the spot because I hadn't finished writing it, but we had scheduled it to get done. And I think that pressure helped that album become better at the end. So that can be a difficult thing because creativity is supposed to be this inspired thing that just pops out of nowhere. It's not supposed to be, it's so hard for me at least to, okay, well, at 6:00 tomorrow, I'm going to sit down and be creative. And that's probably not the case. But then maybe I suddenly have a creative streak and it's not the ideal time. Maybe I'm on a gig. Maybe I'm driving. Maybe it's, I've written songs in the car while I'm driving. I'm not in a studio. I'm not near anything to write that down. I hum things into my voice memos on my phone. So creativity can strike anywhere, but I think that also being regimented of, hey, no matter what, this is when this album is done. This is when the song is done. Because that was the question. When do we know a song is finished? I think by saying, okay, I'm going to work on this, and by this time, that song has to be finished, and I'm going to release it into the wild. And I think that counts if you're creating art to release, kind of like the example with if we're doing it as a composition for film, it's a job. There's a purpose behind it. If you're wanting to put out songs as an artist or as a band or whatever, there's a purpose behind that. If your goal is just to write songs and you don't care if anybody ever hears them, you don't care if they're ever lit out into the world, then the song's finished whenever you say it is. It could never be finished. It could be something like the Mona Lisa, where you're an artist and you care, Da Vinci carried that painting with him for over 20 years and would just work on it. It was never, this has to be done by this time. So yeah, that's the answer to that question. I think it's complicated, but at the end of the day, I don't think a song is ever finished. Before I end it, if you have any questions, boss at Yes Quit Your Day Job, feel free to ask me anything, and I'll keep doing these little daily question and answers. And if you want to see the full podcast where it's me having these conversations with other industry professionals, Yes Quit Your Day Job is the name of the podcast. So it's pretty much wherever you listen to your favorite podcast. Have a good day. All right. Wouldn't you know it? The moment I start filming, and I mean like the countdown was going, that the camera was going to be on, a police helicopter just showed up. And I think it's just one, it might be two, but they're flying over my little housing development here, and they are talking over the loudspeaker about how there's I think they, hard to hear, but I think they said a felony suspect and given a description. So I'm going to keep going because I got shit to do, and I don't want to wait for that not to happen. And I'm an audio engineer, so hopefully you guys won't hear that. But Let's see if I open the door. You might be able to hear. Yeah, they're just doing circles. Anyways, I'll let them worry about that. Today, what we're doing, it is the question of the day. And today's question is, how did you book your first national tour? So we'll try not to let the police helicopters distract us too much here. But yeah, how did you book your first national tour? So there's a couple ways that came about. I had my first band. I had a few bands. So I had my band in high school that we were called Clear Black Glass. Terrible name, great band. And then after high school, I joined this already established band called Protohuman as their bass player, and we were very skinny puppy meets Nine Inch Nails, a little bit of Radiohead thrown in. I wasn't the main songwriter, but I loved industrial music. I loved what those guys were doing. And they've been rehearsing and writing music, but hadn't gone live yet. And I joined that band, and we took it live and had a great time with it. But then I wanted to do my own thing. I wanted to have my own band. So I mentioned this in another one of these questions, but I started my own band. It was called Human Factors Lab, and I wrote all the music and wrote an entire album, put people together. Actually, a couple of the guys that were in Protohuman, one of my dear friends to this day, Darren, a few other guys, we got together and did that. And then Darren and I were like the two main songwriters, and we were like, each of us would write our own songs, but we were writing very different styles. And so it eventually split into two different bands. And he kind of went and took his songs and what they were doing, and they started a new band called Flirting Through Violence, which they were phenomenal at what they were doing. I'm second guessing this helicopter decision. This might not, maybe I should have waited because it's getting worse out there. Anyways. So yeah, Flirting Through Violence, they were just phenomenal. They were doing great stuff. And I went on with Human Factors Lab, and we did a lot of stuff in the South Florida local scene. We branched out regional, and then I remember our first out of state tour. It was more of a mini tour. We booked that. The question was, how did you book it? We booked it through networking. So MySpace was the thing at the time, and we were friends with other bands all over the country. There was this band called Absinthe out of Rhode Island, and we become friends with them. They actually did a remix. If you can look up Human Factors Lab on Spotify or Apple Music, and there's a remix album called Paper that we put out, and there's a remix on there from Absinthe. And so yeah, we did that tour. So they were in Rhode Island. We went up there with them. They invited us up, and so we played this place called The Living Room with them and another band called Bile, which some of you might remember in New York City. They were in the Strangeland movie. Really, really great band, and we were super excited to go up to, out of Florida, not just out of Florida, but up to New England and perform with Bile, this legendary industrial band. So we did that, and it was great. We had a lot of fun. Maybe a year later, I did it again, and we went up and we were doing a lot of stuff. There was this other Orlando-based band called Lunatic Candy Creep. Again, another just fucking amazing band. I kind of adopted their bass player and their drummer, and we put this tour together with both bands. And it's called the Strategies for Tragedy Tour, which, careful when you're naming your tours, because it was a fucking disaster. And God, we talk about there not being failures, failures, it's a gift. I got a lot of gifts on that tour. It was a huge failure. But did I learn a lot. And that tour, I booked myself, and I learned what it was and what it took to really book your own tour and call venues. We did this really cool movie release party in New York City for The Devil's Rejects. And it was the first time we pulled into New York, and first time we'd been to New York City, first time we'd played New York City. And first time we ever saw, we saw it in movies, but to see the the posters that are, like glued onto the construction and onto walls of buildings and stuff. And then sure enough, there it was for a few blocks of the venue. There was our picture and there was our name. And we were doing this, this Rob Zombie Devil's Rejects party. And some of the guys from the movie are there. And it was cool, man. It was really cool. But that tour as a whole, disastrous. The tour itself is a pressure cooker. And, I made so many mistakes. And I mean, from our transportation and our van blew up in the first week, and we wound up like taking cars and then renting a van when we got up north, and made a lot of mistakes that you try not to do, So vehicle troubles, and we were just trying to make it work. Venues, we didn't have deposits on half of them, but we left anyways. And then those venues wound up canceling on us, and we didn't have contracts with pretty much anybody. We were just like, okay, yeah, you're saying you book us. And we show up and they're like, we don't even know who that promoter is, and these are things where you hear of shady people in the music industry, but when you're a young band and you think you know what you're doing, and then you find out really quickly, like we'd always dealt with promoters we knew in Florida, and they're like, yeah, we'll put you on the show, and you take them at their word, and you show up and you do the show and you get paid and everybody's happy. I mentioned in, a previous question a couple of days ago, this guy, Greg at the Culture Room, who was really supportive. And that's who we were used to dealing with, really good people like that. So when we got out in like the real world and we realized like, oh, not everybody wants your best interest or really cares about you as a band. So ultimately I take the blame for that tour falling apart, but I learned a lot, and it was a lot of rookie mistakes that I made because I wanted to do it myself. I was like, I can do this. It's easy, right? It wasn't easy. That tour ended with us going to NAMM in Indianapolis, and there was a lot of internal fighting between the members, and we wound up, me and the keyboardist got kind of stranded in Indianapolis and took a train home while all our gear in the van left with the rest of the guys. And I'm still, I'm still friends with most of them to this day, but it's one of those things where bands are like relationships, and ex-band members can be like ex-girlfriends or ex-relationships. And there was a couple of years we didn't talk, and then we buried the hatchet and realized, like, wound up working together later on and doing some really amazing stuff. So that was the first tour, and that's how I booked it myself. I called venues, I emailed, I sent out press kits. I was persistent. I, used my network and looked up things on the internet and just kind of DIY that tour. And then our next tour, we did it again through networking. There was a band called Synergy 67, and we got on with them, and they had some shows already booked, and we came up and we booked some of them too. And again, it was both our bands kind of acting as our own booking agent, so to speak, and just doing it ourselves, real DIY. And that tour was phenomenal. We love those guys. We did a remix for them. They did a remix for us. But we learned another valuable lesson, because we did that tour in February in the northern Midwest, and we're Florida boys. We show up in flip-flops and shorts. I think our first show was like in Chicago in February. And like, obviously we knew snow existed, but again, it's different when you've never really seen snow before. You've never lived in snow, and now you're touring in snow, and the logistics of that, like, nobody wants to go out in snow. Nobody wants to, we had low turnouts because nobody wants to go to a show when it's negative 10 degrees outside before the wind chill. So we had a couple of really good shows on that. I remember we played Indianapolis. I think that was the first show, was Indianapolis. And we played at this Lions Club, like little concert hall that somebody had rented out. And our local opener was a band called Whittle Monsters. And they were all dressed in these, like, it looked like My Pet Monster from the 80s. But they were like dressed as like Muppets, basically. And they were fucking phenomenal. They were so good. And so we did that tour, but our first like real tour, The way we booked that was, again, through networking. So I'm talking about 4 tours here. 3 of these we did through networking with other bands. There's a lot of power in that. But also the power in that is approaching that. And this is kind of everything, especially in the music business, but I kind of live my life this way. Approaching networking and just people in general of what can I do for this person, not what can they do for me or what can they give me. Every time I meet somebody new, anytime I'm reaching out to somebody, I'm always like, what are you working on? What projects do you have? How can I help? Where can I be useful? And my experience has taught me if you approach networking from the standpoint of how can you help others, it goes a long way and you get a lot more done. So it was networking. Our first real big tour was with Mushroomhead. And the way we got on that tour was we had these friends of mine. It was a band called Crossbreed. They were doing amazing stuff out of Florida. They got signed, toured with Rammstein, and we're on I don't know if they were on Ozfest. They could tell you better than I could, but they were on big festivals and big tours, and they were in all the guitar world and all the music magazines. And I mean, they got signed to Artemis Records, I think it was. But amazing band, amazing performance. I had worked with them. I first met them because they approached me when I had my first studio. I was still in college, and I opened my own recording studio to pay my way through college. And they'd reached out to me, and we started working on what became the New Slave Nation EP. And so we did a lot of the tracking for that there, and we rebuilt some of the tracks. Had a great time, but really got to know those guys and appreciate what they do. And I learned so much from them. They were really just mentors for me, starting off real early. And James, the main guy in that band, to this day is still somebody he's a friend of mine. He's somebody I trust and I converse with. And, we're going to get him on the podcast, so you'll get to meet him and he'll tell you everything he's doing. But, Crossbreed took a hiatus. They just came back out a couple years ago, during the pandemic. And they're doing really cool festivals all over the place right now. I know they're doing Wasteland coming up. If you guys haven't been to that, check it out. Check out Crossbreed for sure. One of my favorite bands just as a fan, but also, James and Ian and everybody in that band, really good people. So, anyways, James, I met them because they approached me to help them work on that album. And we did that in my studio in Orlando. And then Crossbreed was doing a show in Fort Lauderdale. And if I remember correctly, so this was December of 2007. And they it was December of 2007. I think they were playing with Dope. They were playing Mushroomhead. And it could have been maybe somebody else on the bill, but I remember those two. And so we went and I went to the show, and James took me backstage and introduced me to Rick Stitch from Mushroomhead, and was basically it's the 70s, got this band, Human Factors Lab. You guys got to take them on tour with you. And lucky for me, they did. And, like I said, I've talked about this, I think, in a video I did yesterday. So this may seem a little redundant, not to mention repetitive and redundant. But, so we got real lucky. They took us out on tour. And the way we booked that was literally just that, Now, for that specific situation there, we did do what's called a buy-on. We paid the guys from Mushroomhead, their management. We paid a fee to be included in that tour. And at that time, we got a lot of shit from that, from the other local bands, where buying on was really looked down upon. It was almost this unsaid thing of you guys weren't good enough to earn your place on that tour. You weren't good enough to just go on the tour. You had to pay to be on the tour. And there's a little bit of truth in that, and there isn't, right? So as far as the not good enough thing, there's truth in that because nobody knew who we were really outside of Florida. If we booked our own tour, we saw this. We did it a couple times. 50 people show up, maybe, if we're lucky, if we have a good promoter and good local support. So we were not bringing numbers. We're not bringing 500 people like Mushroom Head is. There's no way. So yeah, we're nowhere near as good in that sense, right? So what are we offering to that tour? We're going to show up and bring 10 people to Jacksonville, North Carolina. Like, okay. Maybe if we had like just signed a record deal or had a hit record and we're pulling hundreds of people to the show, there'd probably be a different conversation, but that's not what we were doing. So what we brought to the table is we paid to kind of grease the wheel. There's a lot of expenses that go into touring. There is, you're in the black or in the red day one as a national touring band. You're paying for transportation. You're paying for the crew. You're paying band members. You had probably had a huge merch order that you had to put a lot of money down on to get that merchandise that you have to now sell on tour to get your money back and to make profit. If you haven't done the first show, you're not getting paid for the show. So day one of that tour, you're way in the red. So any money that can come in and grease the wheels and get that machine rolling where it's generating money, where you have money coming in on that tour every day, then all the better, But, and so we got a lot of shit in the local scene where people were like, oh, you bought onto that. But it's like, yeah, but if it was that easy, why didn't you buy onto it? Why didn't anybody else? It's not just having the money, it's establishing yourself within a network and knowing who to talk to that's going to take your money. First of all, not anybody can just buy onto a tour. And the second thing is you have to be prepared to, when you buy on, you're able to fulfill that commitment. You're able to logistically take a team of people out and go on tour and perform and fucking bring it where the fans are loving it. The promoters are loving it. Like, you have to fucking bring it. So yeah, we bought on. But think of Ozfest. Every single band you saw on that stage bought onto that. Most major tours, it wasn't them paying out of pocket like we did. It was their labels are paying, But that's what labels did. Labels would buy their bands onto tours. Labels would pay to get their song on the radio or pay to get it on MTV, and a lot of backdoor deals and stuff like that, with a lot of money going around. And that's why you have a lot of bands that you used to hear on the radio and you're like, this is terrible. How the fuck did this band get signed? It's because somebody put in a lot of money is what it is, So yeah, we bought onto that first tour, and it was one of the best decisions we ever made because we were getting paid. We paid like $4,000, and I think we were out for 6 weeks. And we were getting paid, Mushroom Head was cool enough that in their contract with the venues, they had put in there that we got paid from the venue every night. Now, this doesn't happen now. This was back in 2008. We went out with them in spring of 2008. Nobody does this anymore. Like the national bands are not taking care of their support bands like that. I'd be really shocked if even Mushroom Head did, because it just does now, because it's not done anymore. But at the time, they didn't have to do that, but they put in their payment from the venue, like $300 went to us, which was awesome. They were looking out for us. We made probably $1,000 a night from the merch table. So every single day, our expenses were about $1,000 a day. So profit wise, every day that 300 really came in, because that was kind of our profit margin, where we're around $300 after everybody's paid, transportation, gas, feed everybody, pay all the band members, maybe it wasn't as high as 1,000, but either way, within the first week, we were in the black. We were out of that 400 was paid off. 4,000 was paid off. And for that money, the question again, how did you book that tour? Mushroom Head and their management took care of all the booking. So every contract with every venue was already set. Our name was included. It was on the marquee when we pulled up every day. It was on the day sheets backstage. It was on the flyers that were in the local newspapers. It was on the radio station. If anywhere that those ads went, we were included in that ad mat. And you've heard me say ad mat a couple of times, just short for advertising material. And so we were included in that ad mat. And we made friends and built fans that we still have to this day. The project now is called Seven Factor, but some of those fans carried over and they're like, oh, this is your band now. This is your project. So there's people I still talk to that I met on that first April 2008 tour with Mushroomhead. That was our first major tour. And and those guys treated us really well. Everybody in that band really treated us well, and they spent time with us. They come and hung out on our bus. They acted as kind of older brothers and mentors of guys that have been doing this a long time, and they were doing this on a much higher level than we were. And they knew that we were new to this. We were rookies, man. We were green, and they, there was a little bit of hazing, like they fucked with us. Like, man, I remember one night we were in, I think Atlanta, Georgia, maybe, and we were on stage, and the venue backstage was 3 stories high, and the dressing rooms were on the 3rd story backstage, and there was these giant pieces of styrofoam all over backstage for some reason, like huge pieces of styrofoam. And so Waylon, who is the singer, one of the singers of Mushroomhead, he's got his own band, Killer's Confession now, but Waylon took these pieces of styrofoam and just started throwing them down 3 stories. And the first one hit one of our keyboard players, and she's this tiny, 100 pounds soaking wet. He referred to them as the space hookers. I remember that. But this piece of styrofoam comes out of nowhere and just nails her and knocks her over. And I look up, and there's another one, hits me, and now it's just raining styrofoam. And all of a sudden, security in the club, they grab Waylon, they kick him, they drag him out of the venue. And he's trying to explain to them, like, we're friends. He's fucking with us. It's like they're hazing us. But he's like, I'm the singer for the headliner. You can't kick me out. And then they realized who he was, and that it's, the hazing like that. If you're a support band and you go out of the National and they don't haze you, they don't like you. Like, that's just how it is. Like, these guys were fucking with us, but in a way that really made us feel welcome. And we, like I said, we learned a lot on that tour. We made a lot of fans. We made a lot of money. They invited us back out. So that was spring of 2008. We were back out on tour with them in October of 2008. So yeah, that's the long drawn out story of how I booked my first tour.